From
like
both
from a
chicks,
primary?
from a primary,
Yeah.
from a primary four.
Good.
And then we are going to collect 3 body feathers for genetics.
Yep, like we've done before, okay. Cool.
From both chicks if it's a male and a female. Because we take one from a male.
I guess I'll just narrate or we do it together.
Yeah.
I don't know if Zika mentioned that I work at Chemicals National Park with the Delaware Falcons. Zeke and I have done a bunch of this work together before. So we've got 2 nestlings here. And there's a male and a female here. You can probably already mention it. But the females are like 30% larger than the males, so it's pretty distinctive when you see them next to each other. They're just pulling out of the nest. It's obvious. Their one is quite a bit smaller than the other, so male and female. Yeah, they're very visually oriented, so when you cover their face, they chill out quite quickly. They tend to, when they're not active and standing, they'll sit like this in the nest, so it's kind of nice to let them plop in your lap, so they can just be kind of comfortable. We can do a lot of the stuff that we need to do with them covered and not very stressed out in this position, so that's what we prefer.
Well, yeah, numbers would be
Yeah. So one thing we do kind of like to do in terms of aging is you can take a look sort of at the head and the rest of the body, and when they're especially in the range of like 3 to 4 weeks old, you're looking for the difference between the initial like nestling down versus the juvenile feathers that are coming in. So when they're kind of collapsed like that, and you can see, you know, the basically percentage of dark that's coming out on the wings on the primaries and secondaries versus the rest of the body, and then also the amount of the juvenile feather that's coming in on the rectrices or the tail feathers, especially the basically the ratio of dark to light. If it's sort of 50-50 like that, that's kind of a good indication. I mean, it sounds like we already know how old these birds are, so.
pretty precisely, yeah, but it's good that we can test ourselves.
Right, but especially if it's like in, you know, a wild nest or a nest where you don't have observations this consistently, it's nice to kind of get a sense when you're trying to estimate age. And we do have visual aging guides that we can use to help determine that. Yeah. So, yeah. Usually in the 3-week range like this, it's a really nice time to try the bantam because they're sturdy versus being younger, but they also don't have an instinct yet that they're going to bolt or like fly from the nest. They just sit there usually kind of frozen like a deer in headlights, which is what we had, which makes it a lot easier to get them safely without the potential of them getting injured or jumping from the site. So, yeah, so kind of all that. I guess we can start with, yeah, let's just start with bands. So when we're doing that, we want to kind of make sure that we're getting the right band size. So we have, you know, this measure right here. Usually it's going to be 6 for male or 7A for female. Sometimes there are really large females that are 7B or really small males that are flat. Usually it's in here. So just kind of looking at the size of this and guessing that it's, you know, kind of going to be a normal female. We can start with 7A, and you kind of want to get where it's sort of most narrow, so somewhere right in there, and kind of going like that to measure, just to make sure. So that's kind of like ideal right there. If there's a little bit of give like that, and you can slide without any resistance, that's pretty good. You can see 7B would just be kind of unnecessarily large, and then 6 would just be too snug. It sort of scrapes against all the scales. So I don't know if you, before we put them on, if you want to try that out. But you kind of just do that with sort of this leg over here. And like if you sort of pull it up, you can just sort of pull it out gently and like flop it back. If you flop the legs back, it's not going to hurt the leg. You can kind of just see how.
Yeah, right, like what shoe size fit?
And then I kind of like to like have this go sort of all the way around, just in that area, sort of like slide it a little bit just to see. You can tell that there's a little bit of like resistance, but especially where it's narrow, there isn't really.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like a good bet in terms of what you're looking for. And then with raptors like this, you don't have to worry about it as much, but you're also sort of looking for just making sure that the band is not going to go over the foot. Obviously, they have huge feet, so it's not an issue with songbirds. Sometimes they can be, so that's sort of another consideration when the band is too big.
They've grown an incredible amount.
What's that?
They've grown an incredible amount.
Yeah, it's amazing how fast they grow in the weeks that they're in the nest, for sure. See, it's very quick. Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Are you going to USGS on right?
That's what I was thinking.
Okay, so for on right it'll be 2447 -05495.
So then usually we try to do it so that you can see it when they're like standing up, you know, so that the band is, you know, not upside down. So that you read the numbers correctly. So sort of like that. Folks may or may not know about bands, but there's different types of bands you can use for raptors. You tend to use these bands that push closed and then clip shut. So often if the aluminum is soft enough and it's not a super thick band, you can kind of just do it by hand to get down to sort of where you need to. Otherwise, you can use pliers. And before closing it, because closing it's kind of permanent, it's kind of nice to then roll it again and just make sure you feel like, okay, that's the right size. It's not, you know, going to be restricted longer.
Do you guys want to feel that? So that feels like.
As you kind of roll around and up and down, you can kind of get a sense of
Catch too much.
yeah, just sort of how it feels.
It's going to be the forever.
Yeah.
I'm going to check it.
Yeah.
So at this point, their legs are basically done growing.
Correct. So that's another reason that we kind of wait until this age range before doing it. I've done them as young as like 14 days, and their legs aren't really supposed to grow much after that. I think they actually do a little bit, at least from what I've seen from prairie and dolphins. But then you can size up a little bit, sort of just based on that, like going, okay, it's not going to come off. Yeah, it's going to grow a little bit. And then for putting these bands on, there's a couple of different pliers you can use. Either this type, which is quite nice, or yeah, you can also just use like a needle nose. And then when you're trying to close the clamp here, the sort of risk is if it slips off, you can punch the leg. So you just kind of want to make sure that when you close it, you're being cognizant of that. Often I'll just sort of have a thumb act as like a stopper on one of the noses there, and then just start kind of like slowly pushing shut. So something like that to get the clamp starting to go. You can get it down a little bit closer, and just if you don't have your thumb or finger sort of, you know, as a stopper here, potentially it can slide off more easily. So that's kind of, you know, when it gets fairly close to being shut like that, then you can sort of go to the other side and just sort of just push it shut. So in the middle, and then just sort of clamp it on either side too. Something like that to get it like totally flush. It doesn't need to be like absolutely perfectly flush as long as you can read the whole number, but it can be. I mean, it's again just kind of being really cognizant that you don't hit the foot. And then again, I usually still try to kind of like double check and make sure that it's not going to be like a problem like rolling around. They do tend to lose their shape a little bit, and they're not like perfectly circular. You can sort of squash it a little bit if you want to try to reshape it. It's not usually totally necessary because, you know, it's just going to sit like that. It'll be fine. Yeah. Cool. So, yeah, I guess we should be measuring.
Oh, and
Are you doing, you're doing across as well, this length or just length?
Just the length,
Okay,
yeah,
just
actually.
And is that just kind of for
mostly
documentation?
For documentation, for sexing, and, yeah, that would be
Yeah.
great.
Cool.
I mean, I guess you could do a turns and stuff, but I just,
Yeah.
never needed it, so just use the length gauge.
Another person that we sometimes work with is Doug Bell. He works with East Bay Parks. I don't know if people are familiar with him. He's been doing prairie falcon nest entries in New England for many years. And I originally got a sub-permit to do prairie falcon nest entries through him, and he can collect a lot of data. Some of which I don't think really gets used that much, but some of it is sort of helpful if you have either small females or large males, and you're kind of like, not sure what I'm looking at here. And sometimes in aggregate, all of those measurements help to figure it out.
Yeah.
Especially I've found things like the sear length, or kind of the length from the sear. It's pretty distinctive often from males and females.
Yeah.
So when you're measuring this, they do compared to some other birds have kind of like soft, sort of squishy legs, so it can be a little hard to figure out where you measure from. You basically kind of go from back here to sort of between these two knuckles here. So if it's like this, you can't really see those knuckles well, but if you push it back a bit, you just put it sort of in the groove between there. Usually they come to like 60 to 65, something like that.
Yeah, over 60.
Yeah, Right. Kind of just good until it's sort of snug and not washing this.
Yeah, so yes, the spongy legs is a
So
falcon.
yeah, so 65.6 is kind of what we're doing on this one. I don't know, sort of try that or see how that works.
Other raptors don't have that squishiness, so it's totally different, like measuring falcons and banding, to get banding sizes for them than other raptors, because you could technically sometimes squeeze their leg into, you know, just like when we squeeze our fingers in, yeah, even though it's not fit, but it could fit. So you just have to be really careful about being aware that you're not actually changing the shape of the leg.
Is that sponginess just from like the musculature of their like tissue, or just like because they're catching stuff so
They
it's
have just a
softer?
different quality of skin, like
Yeah.
the other ones, they just look like
Yeah.
just like reptilian,
Yeah.
like.
Totally.
And I think that I mean, yeah, it's probably muscle and other tissues, but it's just because of their
Yeah.
different lineage, so
Yeah.
they are more related to the
Yeah.
seams and parents, or I don't know.
Yeah.
That's changing all the time, but they are not from the same
Yeah.
common ancestor as all the other
Yeah.
raptors.
Because with
species.
pasturing, it's just like skin on bone.
Vultures.
It's like right there. Like,
Yeah, it's
so
just
hard,
like
yeah.
hard, it's hard, it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, and sure there's muscle under there and tendons and things, but it's
So
just
we
that
can do
skin
that.
is hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to squish it.
So like zebrasin, falcons are thought to be more closely related to parrots at this point, which actually, if you look at sort of the way that the sear and the bill work, that actually kind of makes sense. It does look a lot more like a parrot, and you get to like, blue tail hawks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So when we do this measurement, if you sort of, like, I'm just like gently holding the egg, you don't need to squash it or anything. Usually it's somewhere in the like 15, 17 range, so I usually just kind of try to get it sort of somewhere in there, 10, 20, 15, something like that. And then you basically want to go from like the tip of the bill to where the skin is, right here, and without kind of scraping the skin, so just sort of lay it in on there. So just something like that, kind of just like free. And then that usually gets pretty good. So that's actually kind of a lot, that's like 20. Yeah. So if you want to try that.
What's that?
You try, it's still pretty good to just with one hand, like grab the head. And you can kind of like gently move it around. I usually try to sort of grab the head and just kind of rest your finger on the lower bill and then like up here or something. Then you can sort of keep the mouth closed more while you're like trying to do that. Somewhere there. It's always a little fudge.
Gorgeous. Gorgeous.
Yeah.
I love her head shape. Very cool.
Yeah, you can see like once you cover my head, it's kind of like lights out. Like, oh, okay.
It's like, have you ever seen falconers with hoods over? Same idea. It's nighttime. Feathers.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so did you say we're going for?
Oh, sorry, other leg.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Get distracted by our
Yeah,
stories.
And you got all, understood, you got all this.
We've got all that pretty center of the yeah. It's nice to have all this assistance.
I know, right?
Usually, like, sometimes we're doing this all by ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, single person, and you're just like,
You ever like put the baby back and you're like, oh, I never
So
wrote
these
down
ones
the
are,
number.
these ones are nice too
Not
because
that,
it's
but
in
there's,
aluminum, so
yeah,
it's
like a
usually
missed
fairly
number or
easy to
something,
like
and
open
that
up
is
with a
actually
zero.
why I had Jason do this.
Again,
but,
some of the
try
bands
to
are
keep them
thicker
in
and
some
a
sort of
little
order,
harder.
so they can figure it out after
but
and make a mistake.
the,
Yeah.
Because that happens.
yeah, the visual band like this.
I've never,
So again, you
forgotten
sort of just
the
place it so
thing.
that it's staying, you can see this, which, you know,
I have.
people do have like nest video or photos, you often can get sort of sites of that stuff. So, we're gonna be, this, but usually it's nice to kind of get these pre-aligned like that. When you use the rivet gun here and the rivets, it sort of injects like pressure into it. So you really wanna make sure that like your one of your fingers is like pinching it shut, at least that's what I find.
Yeah, you
So
don't
that
want any space between.
yeah, because otherwise, when the rivet pressurizes, it goes between here and then keeps it open, which is kind of a no-no. And then, yeah, with these rivet guns, we've always kind of remarked upon, I'm not really sure why they have these handles so wide. I mean, there's no person who's gonna like need that to be that wide. I mean, I guess maybe if you're going like this, then there's not really much value to doing that. And then you can kind of feel like if you have no pressure at all, this thing just slides out. And if you sort of go to a point where if it starts to get resistance like that, then it's not gonna come out. So that's basically where you wanna get to before you start really squeezing. So that's kind of nice to know, for when you get to the point where I'm like pinching this here, you know, I don't have any pressure yet, but now I'm going to start. You can see it like starts to sort of pressurize right there. Usually it's like a couple of snaps. I usually like to do 2 or 3 so that I don't get any like massive jerking when I'm done with it. So there it goes right there. That's one. So because we already did that, here's like sort of the excess. It basically like pushes metal up into the little rivet so that it pressurizes like that. And this one's usually easier because you've already flattened it, so you don't need to worry about it.
Any particular reason why this one is riveted and the other one is clamped, or did it just happen to be that design?
The latter.
Yeah.
Alright.
There's a company called A-Craft that makes all the caravan bands for North America, and that's how they design them. But they're very durable. We can read them years and years after they've replaced them.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
what color?
So these are lifelong bands. They never fall off, in theory.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never seen it happen. One time we had a rivet that was a little off, or what was, yeah, I think it was a rivet that was, we noticed there was a gap between after and I had put back into the nest and we removed it and replaced it. 'Cause it was a nest cam, so.
Yeah.
Right here, I guess we're doing blue.
Yeah.
This is yours.
I'm sure Zeke has already mentioned this, so sorry if it's repetition, but for the color banding, this does eventually come off, but we put it on the silver, the bird banding lab band to start with, just so that it's easier to tell apart individuals, you know, when they're in the nest and then when they're soon after fledged. So,
Sometimes you can only see one side of the bird, you're like, turn around. But then, yeah, it's just makes them identifiable from all angles.
I don't know that there's really a like strategy for this. I usually like starting kind of near the lock right there, just because
Yeah.
it provides a little purchase to deal with it. Yeah, that's perfect. It's like, yeah, it's like you've been.
It's been a year.
Yeah.
Rusty.
And I don't know, just kind of pushing the tape down so that it stays a little bit better. There's that, and I guess we're just taking a sample. now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you said P4, is that right?
P4, please, yep, no, so,
Okay.
closer to the secondaries. You actually are doing a very good job of feather collecting. All the feathers you collected were like enough mass. Mine are all the board.
Do you feel like sometimes that hasn't been the case with others?
For my, yeah, I was just, you know, like we hadn't been analyzing them, and I was like, I was being very, very conservative with my
Oh, in terms of how much it can.
1 to 2
Gotcha.
centimeters.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
it's not worth it to go less.
Right.
So we start counting down from 10.
Yep.
And 4, 8.
sorry, I got that stuff.
I've made that mistake.
Right, I was gonna say, 'cause we had those.
The first time I collected a P6, which is just closer to the leading edge, and so that can affect flight more,
Yeah.
so that's why we go as far back as we can. What's been published before is S4 and P4 of all ages birds, so that's why we try to be consistent. Doesn't matter as much for nestlings because they're all growing at the same time, but it does matter for adults because you need to make more patterns.
Yeah.
And this is so much easier inside where there's not wind and this below you. Beautiful.
So it doesn't really matter, of course, so we're cutting off the egg because there's gonna be like a huge filler when it's done. And they do multis eventually, and it won't affect their flight at all, given the other input.
Hurts a lot less than blood.
Yeah.
I like that.
So these guys have analyzed these feathers, now you get to see full circle
Wow.
where they came from.
So sometimes birds are just fussy. But sometimes if they start out where they're not fussy and then they get fussy, it's a sign that they're somewhat uncomfortable. So not that they're in pain, but just like that you're not, you can reset yourself a little bit so that they're not fidgeting as much. So like sometimes it's like their legs go between your legs and they can move around, or like something's just off. So you notice they kind of readjusted things here, and now this bird is relaxing a bit again. So it's always nice to do that. It's easier for you and less stressful for them. So in terms of so we're looking for stuff these are all flight feathers. So we're looking for stuff up here.
RP4 and 3.
You can kind of feel some coming through here. Yeah, so like these are some of the back feathers that are just starting to come through. When you pull these, of course, they're uncomfortable, and you often pull out some nestling down too, which is fine. It makes it sound like it's like the end of the world for them. when they start
It's
screaming.
that's how it's going to
Yeah.
You know, we try to do multiples if we can at once, and sometimes we can't.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's just like anything, like the faster, the better. You don't want to go too slow. It's more painful.
So I'm gonna do a couple
Okay,
here. So you can kind of see that there's blood on the end of that.
Yeah.
So because they're still growing, they have that little blood bead. So that's kind of the value.
So I think got everything here we need.
Okay.
Do you want to do a little handling?
Yeah.
And then we'll.
So if you want, if you just kind of get into this sort of position, it can be up like this if that's more comfortable, sit down if more comfortable.
Can you get the abby?
And then we're
Oh, yeah, got that.
Knock on the door and let the abby know that she can see.
So you know, sort of hold it so that their talons and stuff.
Thank you for remembering that.
And then you can use your thumb sort of to capture the weight. And that's usually a pretty like safe way to handle them and to pass them from one person to another. They're also young enough that they're not gonna like grab at you with their talons. So, you kind of feel where their legs are and then get right into it. And then you use this to just cover the head. So it's like they can just sit there like
So before Gavin joined the group, we weren't doing that. He taught us that cool trick, and so it was just a very loud process. So this is much better for the birds and for us.
It's like an off
Yeah, they're
switch.
so visually
Yeah.
oriented. A lot of birds are like that where if it's dark, it's just like boom, they kind of sell it.
My rescue parents would think that.
No, you're a rescue parent. Gavin's got this. Yeah, do you want a quick picture and then?
Yeah.
Well, I can't really tell that there's a bird.
Yeah, oh yeah, you can.
I got a good picture of you with the sheath off.
Okay.
Nice.
Hi, baby. Yeah.
You're so fluffy.
One more. Nice.
Alright. you can come up to Peter if you want. Maybe Natalie, do you want to do data collection?
Yeah. Just gonna let it look down.
And then I'll grab him before I put her back in.
Should I set up another thing the same way?
Exactly, yeah. Use this. Any lights or anything?
So sometimes, there are different places you can look for like parasites numbers, like lice and things like that. And one of the better places is to look at the wings. And if there are parasites, you'll see them just like crawling back into the nest and down when you expose it. Kind of like, ah. But this one has nothing that I can see, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's very normal for them to have that. Because that's tends to accumulate. Alright. Oh, you can stay on that side if you want to.
Here, I
Okay,
put some
yeah,
things in
just
there for you.
Stay, that's for you long later, it's nicer over there, but. I can also hand to that side and then. Maybe it's when they try to practice my skills.
Yeah.
Good job, Gavin. Oh. You think this is a boy? You can do either direction. I kind of like it like this because the legs are easier for me to look at. Head towards me. That's a nice space there.
So at this time, the only reason we think he's male versus female is size.
Size, yeah.
There's no other distinguishing factor? Okay.
Some people, I think faces can look a little different. The head shape can look a little different at this stage. But
But yeah, you can see just,
It's
you know,
about
while he's doing this, other
space,
dimensions are quite a bit smaller.
Mhm. Yeah.
Just gonna sense.
Smaller legs. And when, yeah, looking at
And this one, it fits, right? But it can go kind
Yeah.
of over and there in a way we don't really love. So we like to go on that smaller size. And it's nice, you know, especially when you're doing multiple species and stuff, to not look at the numbers. So you don't go, oh, this has to be a 6. Have that like confirmation rise. Everyone, we can sit here. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. Do you wanna get a feel for that? Turn it kind of 360 too, yeah. Do you see how if you push it, the skin will?
Yeah, definitely.
So if you go smaller, you could
It's actually
separate,
funny, like, one thing
but
I
if you
noticed,
twist it, it wouldn't really find.
the Birdanian lab that makes all these metal bands, the ID band, they recently sort of changed their formula for the 6s, and they used to be thinner, so it was easier to open and close these, and they made them a lot thicker, which I actually find the 6s now almost harder to put on than the 7As.
Yes,
At
yeah,
least for the
that
newer
was nice,
ones.
you know, I'm gonna hand these to you too, so when you get the, so it's a male, you can write the little male symbol on it and on the data sheet too. Once we get the band numbers, we could also put those on the envelope. And Peter can help you too, if I feel like.
Yeah, you feel like that newer one.
Yeah, I know, unfortunately.
Just interesting, I wonder what the justification was for that, or if it wasn't anything, it was just kind of like.
It's just like, oh, we should just use this metal that we have.
Yeah.
Make some bands up of it. But everyone. So I like this one's better for
Oh,
this.
sorry, I guess we didn't get that, we didn't, get that number.
Okay, we got sorry. So it's 1266 dash 17086. So 1266 dash 17086. I'm gonna put this one on the left leg. And what was I gonna say? Oh, the other nice thing about the number is it tells you the size of the band. So the number right before the dash is the band size. So 66. So when you're like, you know, just after the fact trying to remember what was going on, it's a helpful little cue there. So I'm gonna try to hand tighten it as much as I can because that keeps the band on the round, but because like we said, it is a very thick metal for these little bands. I'm gonna probably end up needing to.
You can keep the dash, yeah, it sort of lets people know that it's 76 over, VA in terms of orientation. Yeah.
do a little bit of torque for closing this flange for me. Anywho, because that's the hardest part. Just here. And like that. And then I can make it smaller to get that part. Teresa Ely from Jujera showed me these guys, and I don't know if it's just like woman hands or what, but it was really helped me do this part. Alright, so nice fit. Yay. There's the other side. Yeah, I'll get a big measurement. Let me try that.
Oh, yeah.
too. So that was left leg. Yeah. I'm gonna do the tarsus. And we go from this joint to this joint here, not the foot joint.
Just kind of a way that they're already. But this one basically will be all that info plus minerals that feed health, and it'll give you an
Actually, I want to say 59.0 millimeters. For the tarsus. For the tarsus, yeah. Because it's like. Alright. Peter, do you want to come over this side for this part? I'm doing this. Maybe you can sit on like in between us like there, something like that, and you can scoot that way. I know we're tight, but face us or next to us or however it's, yeah, there we go. And then, here's that, here it is. Hello. How are you doing? Hello. You can see how their tongues have those little hooks on them.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, like all raptors have that. And so like when we catch them with nets and things like that, the net can get stuck up against those. So you always have to just be very careful about things around their mouth. We don't want it to pull on those. So we're gonna measure the Pullman from the sear to the tip of the bill. And we have triangle, third fold. I like to push the fixed end against the sear and then move the bottom end to the, I think, that's how I usually do it. Move the bottom end to- it's just a small tip, so it's hard to hit. Make sure it still is the sear. Alright, I know what I got. I'm not gonna influence your Oh, you gotta hold her. I was gonna let you measure without holding. You can also hold later, but it might be easier. I'm not going to hit anything.
Give out your
Yes, you can grab it here. Just be very gentle there. And you don't have to close the belly. You can let them gate for this. So. Nice. Tapping each other. Nice, yeah. So hold that there. Of course, the move. What do you get? I know it's hard to figure it out.
2 centimeters.
Oh yeah, so it's like this. So here's the so 10 plus these numbers, and then the middles are the single digits.
18.8
Okay.
milliliters.
No, that's okay. Mine was a little different, but it's a good average. Doesn't mean I was right. Yeah, so I had 17, you had 18, you had 16. So they would just go with 17 in the middle. And so she's so happy. Hi! Sorry. Alright. And then do you have those feather envelopes? Oh yeah. Get this on before I forget. Or do you have
Yeah.
Natalie, you can see at the top one, I wrote blue on like the top right corner if you want to write.
Oh, right, so if you could write the color, next to, I think you got it, yeah, next to the USGS band number,
Yeah.
because that's the leg that it's on. So it's gonna be your right, it's gonna be blue, so it'll be just write blue right after the 12. Yeah, yeah. That's great. I can always keep you too big. Oh yeah, it's like, put you on. Oh yeah, I forgot, these used to have to be skinnier, a little bit.
Right, that's right.
Shave it off a little bit. So I heard you had like one of our EMBS students, part, I think she works with, some sort of like, habitat, like botany, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Like as an intern?
Yeah, Sadie, and she
Yeah.
went to help with some nest
Yeah.
survey, she reached out after with it.
Yeah.
Rick Brindle, I was like, hey, you must have let down.
Yeah, I kind of realized, there was a limited window of time, but we had a couple of long-eared owl nests. And, I was like, if you guys want to see them, and have time this morning, so then I took a bunch of photos out, including all the veg.
Veg, that's, yes,
Yeah.
there you go.
They were really like invasive plants.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they were looks pretty good.
Nice. Right, so we're gonna take right in the feather. Leave. Go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Your turn. Alright, keep up, be strong. Yeah. Oh. Thank you for our four. Lovely. And then the left one first.
Do that little tape.
But wait, another question that may or may not occur to people is, you know, of course, when you take birds out of the nest, it is somewhat invasive. And so the question comes up, well, how long is too long to have birds out of the nest? And of course, you try to process them as quickly as you can. The nice thing with most raptors, including falcons, they're super aggressive and territorial. And by this point, with the nestlings at like 3 weeks old or more, they've invested so much time into the process of like raising them that they're very, very unlikely to abandon the nest. You know, they're gonna keep coming back. So even if it takes you like 45 minutes or an hour, it's not like it's a threat to the nest success.
Yeah, they'll hear their babies. They can probably hear them now.
But it's one thing that I think a person would be like, oh no, is it okay to have them out of the nest for a bit? Fortunately, it is with falcons.
Alright, so let's do a little handling explanation. I think I'll hand to you first and then you can come take this off. So anytime you're handing over a bird, you need to really communicate like when you are releasing the bird and when the other person feels comfortable without the bird. You never want to like let go too early. You don't want them to get away or anything like that. In general, they're just like a little football that you're protecting. I'm gonna put them right onto your lap, and then you can kind of take them from there. But wings are delicate, legs are delicate, so we just kind of like to keep them tucked in. Both of those things kind of tucked into their bodies. They don't go out at strange angles. And you never want to hold their chest too tight. I'll let you kind of just brace the wings there. Speed out the bird. Yeah. And let go. They breathe using air sacs that stay inflated. So if you push those air sacs down, and this happens a lot with people, chickens at home as they're handling them and stuff by mistake, they actually can't breathe any longer. It's not like us where like, you know, if our head's exposed, we can breathe. They require their sacs to be fully open. So just so you can experience that change.
She did? Okay. This one? I didn't see her come out, that's all.
Hey, baby. Yeah. So then they come down. So it's just, I love this protocol. I'm gonna scoot so you can do a handoff to you. Yeah.